The party had begun in the usual way, with warm laughter bouncing between relatives, the faint smell of frosting and coffee lingering in the air, and the glow of golden bulbs strung across the living room, casting everything in a gentle, safe light. My mother was radiant at the center of it all, her birthday crown slightly tilted, her voice carrying a joy that made her look younger than she had in years, while my cousins hovered around the cake, eager for a slice. My fiancée squeezed my hand every now and then, her smile polite, though her eyes wandered more often than usual, scanning the room as if she were waiting for something that the rest of us could not sense. For a moment, I thought I was imagining it, dismissing the uneasy knot in my stomach as nerves. But the longer I sat in that room, the heavier the air seemed to become, like something unseen pressing down on us. There was laughter, there was music, but beneath it all I felt something else, an undercurrent of tension, quiet yet undeniable, threading its way through the night. As the candles were lit and the song began, shadows played strangely across the walls, stretching longer than they should have in the corners, their movements not quite matching the flicker of the flames. My mother leaned forward, her smile unwavering, and for a moment everything felt right, but then the draft came, cold and sharp, brushing past my cheek, even though every window had been closed. One of the smaller candles went out on its own, making a few people chuckle nervously, though their laughter cracked at the edges, betraying unease. I glanced at my fiancée, and in the glow of the remaining flames I saw her jaw tighten, her fingers wrapping more firmly around my hand, as though she were preparing for something she alone understood. I opened my mouth to ask her if she was all right, but before I could speak, a sharp chill swept through the room and the lights above us flickered once, twice, and then surrendered to the darkness. Gasps cut through the room, followed by nervous laughter that quickly turned to overlapping voices as confusion spread, chairs scraping, glasses clinking, and a child's small cry breaking the air. My phone was in my pocket, but before I could reach for it, I felt her. My fiancée, gripping my hand so tightly that it hurt, the suddenness of her hold freezing me in place. She leaned into me, her lips brushing against my ear, her voice nothing more than a breath that trembled against my skin, but it was enough to silence every thought in my mind. "Run," she whispered, the words slicing through the panic like a command, not a suggestion, carrying a weight I had never heard from her before. In that instant, I realized that whatever had just happened was not simply a blackout, not some harmless accident, but something she had already anticipated, something she had been dreading. I tried to steady my breathing, but the dark felt alive, swallowing sound and space, making it impossible to know where one body ended and the next began. People were calling out names, fumbling for their phones, their screens flashing briefly before being swallowed in the heavy black that seemed to thicken with each second. The air smelled of extinguished candles and something else beneath it, something metallic and cold that turned my stomach. My mother's voice rose above the noise, calling for calm, but her words trembled as she searched for someone to reassure her, her confidence cracking in the unseen presence of whatever lingered among us. My fiancée tugged at my arm, pulling me toward the edge of the room with a quiet urgency, her silence telling me everything I needed to know. This was not a moment to question her, and yet, beneath her command, beneath her urgency, I could feel her fear pulsing like a heartbeat against my own. Somewhere in the blackness a sound emerged, quiet at first, deliberate, a footstep that didn't belong to any of us, slow and steady, as though whoever it belonged to wanted us to hear it. The chatter stilled for a moment, people holding their breath, straining to listen, though no one dared speak aloud the truth we all suddenly felt. Someone was here with us. My chest tightened, the weight of it pressing against my ribs as though the house itself was suffocating me, and in the silence my fiancée's whisper echoed again in my mind, relentless, undeniable, "Run." And though my body hesitated, caught between reason and terror, I knew in my bones that this night, this celebration meant to honor life, had already been rewritten into something else entirely. The chaos spread quickly, voices overlapping in confusion as the darkness pressed against us like a suffocating veil, every sound magnified and distorted. My cousins shouted for their parents, their cries swallowed by the frantic shuffle of bodies bumping into furniture, while the clinking of glasses shattered the illusion of order. My fiancée pulled me harder through the crowd, weaving us past stumbling relatives who had no idea where to move, her focus unwavering in contrast to the panic. My mother's voice rose once more, demanding calm, but the tremor beneath her words betrayed her fear, the uncertainty she tried desperately to hide. Somewhere behind us a man cursed as he dropped a tray, the crash ringing out like a gunshot that made everyone freeze, and in that sudden silence it came again, that sound. slow and deliberate, the unmistakable echo of footsteps advancing from the hallway. They weren't rushed, weren't clumsy, but steady and measured, as though whoever was walking wanted us to hear every step. My skin prickled, my instincts screaming that the darkness was no longer just an absence of light, but a cover for something waiting to reveal itself. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe a family member heading toward the fuse box, but the weight in my fiancée's grip said otherwise, and I trusted her instincts more than my own. We reached the edge of the living room, where the shadows were heavier. The glow of the last few phone screens faint and unreliable. She paused only long enough to glance behind us, her face pale and tense, her lips pressed into a thin line that spoke more than words could. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled me onward, and for the first time I realized she wasn't just reacting. She had expected this, as though she had known it would happen. My chest tightened with 100 questions, but the fear in her eyes told me this wasn't the moment to ask. Around us, relatives whispered frantic prayers or reassurances, but the sound of breathing, slow, deep, and not belonging to anyone nearby, cut through everything else. It was coming from the hallway, closer now, patient in its approach. As we edged toward the back of the house, I felt the walls themselves closing in, their familiar frames warped into something hostile by the absence of light. Every creak of the floorboards beneath us carried like a scream in my ears, betraying our movements to whoever or whatever was listening. My mother's voice called again, weaker this time, asking if someone had found the candles, but her words trembled, hollow, like she already knew it didn't matter. A phone lit briefly on the other side of the room, casting a blue glow over pale, terrified faces, only to flicker out again as the battery died, plunging them back into suffocating dark. My fiancée's whisper reached me again, sharp and urgent, telling me to stay quiet, to move faster, and the authority in her voice silenced every doubt. Still, I couldn't stop my imagination from painting the image of a figure standing in the hallway, unseen but very real, waiting with inhuman patience. The idea burrowed deep, and with every breath I felt it closer. The further we moved, the more the atmosphere shifted, as though the air itself thickened, carrying a metallic tang that clung to my tongue. My skin broke into a cold sweat, my heartbeat loud enough to drown out the confused murmur of my family. Somewhere to my left, a child whimpered, the sound abruptly silenced by a parent's shushing, and the abrupt cut made the room feel even emptier, as if silence itself had teeth. My fiancée led me toward the sliding back door, her every movement deliberate, but when she reached for the handle, her hand froze mid-air. I followed her gaze, and though I couldn't see clearly in the dark, I knew what she saw, a faint outline, taller than any person I knew, framed just beyond the glass. My breath hitched, my body going rigid, every instinct screaming at me to flee, but I couldn't move. And then, in the space of a blink, the outline was gone, leaving only the echo of presence behind. She didn't speak this time, only pulled me away, her grip iron tight. Panic spread like wildfire as someone screamed from the center of the room, a raw, guttural sound that shattered the fragile control everyone had clung to. People rushed blindly in every direction, colliding with one another, their movements frantic and uncoordinated, a herd trapped in invisible confines. The sound of breaking glass rang out, followed by another scream, then another, until the house itself seemed alive with terror. I stumbled as my fiancé pulled me through the madness, my vision filled only with fleeting shapes and streaks of shadow. I could feel something following us, something moving when we moved, stopping when we stopped, its presence more suffocating than the dark itself. The party had become a trap, the laughter and warmth replaced with hysteria and fear, and there was no safe corner left in the house. My fiancée leaned close once more, her whisper breaking against my ear, trembling but unyielding. If we don't leave now, we won't leave at all. The moment we broke away from the cluster of panicked voices, the house itself seemed to shift, the floor groaning as if reacting to the sudden surge of fear within its walls. My fiancée dragged me toward the hallway, her movements sharp and desperate, her silence screaming louder than the chaos behind us. I turned my head once, just enough to see my mother in the glow of a phone screen, her eyes wide and searching, her mouth open in a silent plea I couldn't answer. My chest ached with the instinct to run to her to help, but the hand holding mine was iron, pulling me away before I could act. The sound returned, closer now, the same slow footsteps, patient and deliberate, carrying a weight that didn't belong to anything human. Each step echoed, magnified in the silence that followed the screams, as though the house itself was amplifying the sound. I realized then with bone-deep certainty that whatever was moving toward us wasn't walking randomly. It was hunting, and it knew exactly where we were. The hallway stretched out like an endless tunnel, the darkness so absolute that even the faint glow of my phone screen seemed to die before reaching the walls. My fiancée pulled me forward with unwavering determination, her breathing controlled but shallow, as though she knew a single mistake could betray us. Behind us, the noise of the party had fractured into chaos. Cries, shouts, the sound of more glass breaking, and above it all, a chilling silence that followed each scream, as though voices were being swallowed whole. I dared a glance behind, and in that fractured second of dim light from a phone I saw it, a figure taller than the doorframe, its edges blurred, its face hidden in shadow, but its presence undeniable. My blood froze, my body refusing to move until my fiancé yanked me forward with such force that pain shot through my arm. She whispered again, but this time it wasn't run, it was don't look, her voice trembling, as though even acknowledging it might give it power. We stumbled toward the back door, the promise of escape pulling us onward, but the shadows themselves seemed to resist, clinging to us like living things. The sound of footsteps followed, but not with haste. They came with unbearable patience, closing the distance without ever needing to hurry. My fiancée reached the door, fumbling with the lock, her fingers trembling in the darkness, while I turned instinctively to guard her. My heart stopped when I saw it again, closer now, its silhouette emerging fully from the hallway, its head tilted slightly, unnaturally slow, as though curious about us, as though savoring the moment before it acted. The shadows bent around it, hiding details but emphasizing its unnatural height, its shape wrong in ways my mind refused to process. I wanted to scream, to warn everyone still trapped inside, but my throat closed, my body paralyzed by the certainty that my voice would draw it closer. And then, without warning, the door behind us rattled violently, as if the house itself was trying to keep us inside. My fiancée finally forced the lock open, shoving the glass door with all her strength, but the moment it slid open, a gust of icy air rushed in, extinguishing even the faint glow of nearby phones. The sudden cold made my skin burn, my teeth clattering, as though I'd stepped into winter, though outside was supposed to be warm. She pushed me through first, her urgency a shield against the terror that rooted me to the spot, and I stumbled onto the back porch, gasping as though I'd surfaced from drowning, but she hesitated, her body half in and half out, her gaze locked on the shadows inside. "It's not just in the house," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time, and the weight of those words hit me harder than any scream could. Because in that moment I understood, whatever it wasn't confined by walls or doors. It had followed us here outside, into the open night. The yard stretched out before us, bathed in weak moonlight, but instead of feeling free, it felt exposed, every corner alive with the possibility of movement. My fiancée slammed the door behind her, locking it as if it could buy us time, though deep down we both knew it wouldn't hold. The silence outside was worse than the noise inside. It was too complete, as though the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. I clutched her hand, desperate for direction, my body trembling with adrenaline, while she scanned the shadows with the sharpness of someone who had been preparing for this moment all along. Then, from the tree line at the far end of the yard, came the sound, slow, steady, unmistakable, the same deliberate footsteps we had heard inside. My fiancée's grip turned painful, her eyes locking on mine with raw urgency. "We can't stop," she whispered, her voice cracking. "If it reaches us, it's over." And in that terrible silence, I believed her completely. The night air was sharp in my lungs, every breath a reminder that we were still alive, though barely clinging to the thread of safety. My fiancée pulled me across the yard, her movements desperate yet calculated, as if every step had already been rehearsed in her mind. Behind us, the house was a silhouette of chaos, voices shrieking, windows rattling, and in between those sounds, a silence that was somehow worse than the screams themselves. My legs burned as we stumbled over uneven grass, my shoes slipping in the dew, but I didn't dare slow down, not with that sound still following us. The deliberate footsteps came again, slower than our sprint, yet never distant, as if space bent to keep it near. My fiancée glanced back only once, her face pale in the moonlight, her jaw tight with grim determination. "Don't look," she repeated, though her own eyes betrayed the terror she carried. The words weren't for me anymore. They were for herself, a fragile shield against the truth that stalked us. And still we ran, though the night seemed endless. At the far end of the yard, the tree line loomed like a wall, its shadows denser than the darkness behind us, alive with whispers of wind that didn't belong to the breeze. My fiancée didn't hesitate. She pulled me straight into the trees, the branches clawing at our arms and faces as we pushed forward. The forest floor was uneven, littered with roots and stones, and each stumble felt like an invitation for the thing to close the distance. The air was colder here, unnaturally so, frost clinging to leaves where no frost should be, my breath misting in thick clouds. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, but beneath it, always beneath it, was the steady rhythm of footsteps that weren't ours. I tried to speak, to ask her what it was, how she knew, but the words died in my throat as if even naming it would summon it closer. Her silence was answer enough. She had known all along that tonight would not end in celebration. And now we were trapped between a house we couldn't return to and a forest that swallowed every sound. We crashed into a small clearing, the moonlight filtering through the branches, giving us a momentary sense of space, though not safety. My fiancée released my hand only long enough to grip my shoulders, her eyes wide and searching mine with a ferocity that made me shiver. "Listen to me," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "It won't stop, not until it has what it came for." Her words tore through me, heavy with a certainty that made my stomach churn. I wanted to deny it, to cling to reason, but denial felt like a luxury we no longer had. Behind us, the sound came again, closer now, each step resonating with a weight. that bent the air itself. I spun instinctively toward the sound, but she grabbed my face, forcing my eyes back to hers. "Don't," she hissed. "If you see it, it sees you." The raw fear in her voice rooted me still, and I realized the only thing more dangerous than running blind was daring to look. The clearing was suffocating, the trees forming a cage that funneled the shadows inward, as if we had been herded there on purpose. My fiancé pulled me toward the far edge, where a faint glimmer of light suggested the world beyond the forest, but the footsteps circled us, slow and patient, like a predator, savoring the chase. My breath came in ragged gasps, the taste of iron on my tongue while the cold burrowed into my bones. She whispered something I almost didn't catch. "We can't fight it," and the finality in her tone cracked whatever hope I had left. My mind screamed for escape, but my body betrayed me, frozen by the dread of being pursued by something I couldn't see. The silence stretched, and in it I heard the faint sound of breathing, deep and steady, right behind me. I clenched my eyes shut, praying it wasn't real, but the warmth of its presence pressed against my back undeniable. My fiancée yanked me forward, her strength the only thing keeping me from collapsing. We broke through the trees at last, stumbling into an old dirt road bathed in silver moonlight, the sudden openness overwhelming after the suffocating dark. My lungs burned, my body trembling as though my very soul had been drained, but she didn't let me stop. "Keep moving," she urged, her voice hoarse but unyielding, her grip unbreakable. The footsteps had stopped the moment we crossed the tree line, the silence behind us deafening in its absence, as if the forest itself had swallowed the creature whole. But I knew better. We both did. It hadn't vanished. It was waiting, watching, patient as always. My fiancée's face glistened with sweat, her eyes locked on the stretch of road ahead like salvation. Yet even as she pulled me onward, her whisper returned, softer this time, almost broken. "It's not gone. It never leaves." And in that moment, under the indifferent glow of the moon, I realized we hadn't escaped. We had only postponed the inevitable. The dirt road stretched endlessly under the pale light of the moon, every shadow cast by the trees along its edge, twisting into forms that set my imagination on fire. My legs felt like lead, each step a battle against exhaustion, but my fiancée never loosened her grip, pulling me forward with a determination that was almost frightening. Behind us, silence reigned, but it was the kind of silence that wasn't empty. It was loaded, alive, like the pause before a predator pounced. I glanced back once against her warning, and though there was nothing visible on the road, the weight of unseen eyes pressed into me until I turned away again, heart pounding in my ears. My fiancée's whisper cut through the night, her voice ragged but commanding. "Don't look back again." The certainty in her tone was unshakable, and I obeyed, even though dread gnawed at my chest. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that the moment I truly saw it, the game would end. And so we walked on, blind in the ways that mattered most. The road eventually curved toward the faint glow of distant houses, tiny pinpricks of light in the sea of darkness, promising safety, or at least the illusion of it. My body surged with a desperate hope, the thought that we might find help, other people, some explanation for the nightmare that had engulfed us. But my fiancée slowed, her steps faltering, her gaze fixed not on the lights ahead, but on the forest behind us. Her expression was unreadable, caught between exhaustion and resignation, as though she already knew safety was an illusion. "It will follow," she murmured, her words barely audible, but they cut through me all the same. I wanted to argue, to tell her that once we reached the town everything would be fine, but the conviction in her eyes silenced me. She wasn't just afraid, she was certain, and certainty in her voice meant the truth was worse than I could bear. We collapsed at the side of the road, both of us gasping, our bodies trembling from the endless run. For a brief moment, the night was still, the air heavy but unmoving, and I allowed myself to believe we had bought time. My mother's face haunted me, frozen in that last moment I saw her, and the guilt of leaving her behind gnawed at me like a blade. I wanted to go back, to fight, to do something other than flee, but my fiancée's hand pressed against mine, her touch both tender and firm. "If you go back, you won't come out again," she said, her voice cracking for the first time. Her words struck with finality, carrying the weight of someone who had already seen what awaited us. I wanted to ask how she knew, what she wasn't telling me, but I realized that the answers didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was survival, and even that felt like a fragile hope. As we rested, I became aware of the world around us, shifting in small, unnatural ways. The air grew colder with every passing second, the silence stretching longer, heavier, until even the sound of our breathing felt out of place. A shape moved at the edge of my vision, tall, still, waiting, but when I turned, nothing was there. My fiancée's grip tightened again, and I understood without her saying a word. It hadn't stopped. It was here with us, in the quiet between heartbeats, watching, waiting, patient as ever. I buried my face in my hands, shaking, a broken laugh escaping me as the hopelessness of it all settled in. "We'll never outrun it," I whispered, though I hadn't meant to speak aloud. She didn't argue, didn't offer comfort. Her silence was an answer far louder than words, and in that silence the truth pressed in on me. Running had never been escape. It had only been postponement. We rose again, weak but unwilling to stop, and continued down the road toward the distant lights that seemed no closer than before. The night swallowed every step, every breath, yet we pressed on, tethered together by fear and the fragile hope that movement itself was survival. My fiancée's voice broke the silence one final time, quiet, resolute, carrying the weight of prophecy. "It won't end tonight." The words chilled me more than the cold air, but I understood them as truth. Whatever had found us in that house wasn't bound by doors or walls or forests. It was something that existed beyond reason, beyond escape, and it had marked us. The lights ahead shimmered like salvation, yet deep in my bones I knew salvation was a lie. We weren't running toward safety, we were running toward the next chapter of the hunt, and under the pale, indifferent moon, I realized that some birthdays don't end. They simply change what you're celebrating. Enjoying the content? Don't forget to hit subscribe, give a like, and leave a comment to let me know your thoughts. Your support helps bring more stories to life.